Well, if you were hoping, wishing that things might be different from the Spanish Grand Prix onwards, because this is the race in which a new technical revision is coming into play, in which the front and rear wings are being subjected to higher tests in terms of flexibility, and therefore, if McLaren had some sort of secret advantage in that area, maybe from the Spanish Grand Prix onwards, it wasn't going to be so clear. Well, if that's what you're thinking, I'm afraid there's bad news, certainly from Friday anyway, in the build-up to the Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona. McLaren-Mercedes, MCL39, just the class of the racetrack. Absolutely superb. Oscar Piastri quickest on the soft tyre, but even more impressive was Lando Norris on a 10-lap old set of medium tyres, doing a high 18 right at the end of the long runs at the end of FP2. Everybody else was doing 19s, 20s, 21s. If anything said this is a McLaren weekend, it was that. Of course, lots could happen as the weekend develops, but just to reflect on what I've just been talking about, have a look at these notices put out by the teams to the FIA, which have been made public, which reflect the teams' changes on their specific cars at this race around that new regulation. So yeah, here's the Ferrari notice. Front wing load redistributions phased with the update of the technical regulations. Rear wing outboard tip and roll geometries. Yeah, okay, well that's that one. Red Bull front wing revised geometry to gain stiffness at minimal weight cost and iterated to pursue the load characteristics sought. Yeah, well, fair enough. A bit of a mouthful in terms of what they're trying to say, I think, but I get the gist of it. Mercedes rear wing circuit-specific increased camber to gain local downforce and drag along an efficiency slope appropriate to Barcelona, said in true Mercedes tradition. Here's Aston Martin. We'll include them as well because we know Adrian Newey is a big player there now. Aston Martin front wing, main wing sections revised for compliance with latest technical regulations. So about what you'd expect. So let's see what McLaren have said and declared about their cars at the Spanish Grand Prix. McLaren, no updates submitted for this event. Absolutely fait accompli. Thank you and good night. Nothing more to be said. Not only are they super quick still, but they're also saying, well, we've been legal all along, so why do we need to make any changes to the front wings? It's only the Red Bulls, the Ferraris, and everybody else that's got to make modifications. So if that isn't depressing news for all the opposition of McLaren, I don't know what is. I think we're left to just look at the battle between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, because at least that's a good motor race between two quick drivers in a very good car, identical cars in terms of their race with one another. And it was pretty evenly split today. Oscar Piastri quicker on the soft tyre. I'd love to be able to talk about it, but F1 TV in their wisdom, while Oscar was going for that lap on a new set of softs, were following Lance Stroll, and it was a little bit like that today. Quite difficult to see what a lot of the drivers were doing because of the camera angles we were getting and the corners we weren't seeing. As I said in the build-up to this race, by far and away the most technically interesting part of the Barcelona circuit and the most demanding in terms of what one driver can do really well and perhaps another can't, is that section out of turn 2 into turn 3, the change of direction. Turn 3 is really important because it's basically flat in 6th gear. Well, it is flat in 6th gear, and that leads on to a bit of a straight as well. So how you come out of 2 and how you go into 3, really critical. And 3, obviously there's a lot of lateral load. It's a quick corner, and you've got to ask as little of the car as possible in that change of direction. You've got to get the car settled. And that's what Max Verstappen was doing beautifully today in the Red Bull, a car that Yuki Tsunoda on soft tyres said had absolutely zero grip front and rear. But Max somehow found a sweet spot in terms of grip level. Nothing like the same balance or overall downforce as the McLaren. It was very clear to the eye. But Max in turn 2, lovely little bit of additional steering lock, coming out with slight understeer, the way he was massaging that understeer, absolutely beautiful to watch, allowing him then to have a virtually straight exit from 2 and almost to line it up into 3 without any change of direction at all. Contrast that with, say, the Liam Lawsons of this world, the Carlos Sainzes, the Alex Albons, even, I've got to say, the Oscar Piastris, who are going to the right coming out of 2, and then a big ask as the change of direction to the left, loading up the left rear, and then going into the right. Oliver Behrmann had a big spin in the Haas Ferrari at exactly that moment. In his defense, there were 2 cars on the inside, and probably who's a little bit offline, got a little bit on the marbles in doing that. But nonetheless, it was a very good indication of how much is asked of the car if you do one of these wide exits from 2 and then a late turn into 3. And I would say 75% of the field are doing that. And it's only right at the top that we're seeing the Charles Leclercs, the Max Verstappens, to some extent the Lando Norris. Well, let's go back to that battle between Lando and Oscar Piastri. As I said, at the moment, that could be the battle of the race. It could be the only battle of the race. Well, that's not strictly true. I think Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari just behind them look relatively closely matched now. George Russell was very good, and Antonelli not far behind him in FP2 today as well, but we'll get onto that in a second. In terms of Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris through 2 and 3, I think Lando's got the technique that's going to be a little bit kinder to his tyres over a long distance. Of course, all of that could be completely nullified by whoever's in front and who's behind and who's got dirty air and who's got clean air. But putting that to one side, this is a good example of sometimes when we talk about short corners and why don't some drivers do it and others do. I try to make the point that it's all about the ability of the driver and his technique and his ability to feel the front end and massage what the front end's doing, not only with steering, but also with decreasing brake pedal pressure against steering load and getting that absolutely right. Different every lap, different every corner. But Lando definitely has that feel, I think, slightly better touch than Oscar Piastri in that specific area. Oscar very good in other areas. But in that specific area, we're seeing Lando there today into doing exactly that, almost the same as Max Verstappen, the additional lock he's giving the car. And he's coming out not quite as straight as Max, not quite as straight in exits, got a little bit of a curve to it. Lando always thinks in curves, Max in straight lines. But Lando's coming out, he's got a very gradual curve, and then he doesn't come over much. Comes over right of centre for turn 3. It looks really good. Whereas Oscar is getting on the power a little bit sooner. He's braking a little bit later. As I said, that's one area where he's always going to be super good. Brakes later into 1, got the wide entry into 1, wide entry into 2. He's got a little bit more slide on the car, a little bit of oversteer, which he holds beautifully, not with opposite lock, just with throttle control. But then coming out, he's got more of a curve on the car, but then he straightens the wheel and runs absolutely straight on acceleration. So he's going, that's 4th gear when they're doing that in turn 2. He's going 4th, 5th, and then getting 6th. And just as he's getting 6th, he's moving slightly to the left. But that move to the left is more abrupt than anything Lando's doing. And they're both going, I'd say Oscar's going more to the left, maybe over the centre of the road, just on centre, going into 3 as well. So there's a difference. And it was quite amusing, actually. At the beginning of the first run, when they were on mediums, at the beginning of FP2, Oscar was slower generally than Lando on the medium tyre. But he was quickest in Sector 1. He went purple in Sector 1, although it was disguised because both Lando and Max had traffic on mediums in their run. So Tom Stallard got on the radio to his engineer, got onto Oscar and said, it might amuse you to know that you're actually purple in Sector 1 at the moment. And Oscar said something like, in typical Black Jack Brabham mode, oh, well, yeah, so drifting the car does work there then. Yeah, it's good. Which is obviously, he's not going to slide the car any more than he wants to. But Oscar definitely is using the McLaren MCL39 as much as he possibly can there, maybe a little bit too much. And whether the tyres will take that over a longer distance is another matter. But on the soft tyre, incredibly good. Lando did have traffic, and that has to be borne in mind. Not massive traffic on his quickest lap, and Oscar getting a lot out of the tyres in Sector 3 as well. In general, Barcelona at the moment with these cars and with the television angles they've got, I find quite frustrating because that great bit of road, turn 2, turn 3, is right at the beginning of the lap. And typically with the directors these days, they're looking at the segments and they're saying, oh, he's on a quick lap, let's go and watch him. By the time they've realised it and they're on him, it's like turn 6, turn 7, and all the good stuff is over. And if you watch the cars anywhere from turn 4 onwards, really, they all look pretty much on rails. And if you didn't know the lap time they were doing and you were following, say, Lewis Hamilton on a lap, and then you were following, I don't know, Liam Lawson on a lap, and then you were following Lando Norris on a lap, they'd all look pretty similar. They're all basically doing the same thing. They're kind of line locked into what they're doing. Obviously, the grip levels are different from team to team, and that's what distinguishes them in terms of lap time. But in terms of the rest of the lap, they're not doing a lot different from one another. Yeah, Charles Leclerc has the odd moment on exit of turn 9, the quick right-hander. So does Lewis Hamilton. So did Lewis Hamilton once on his quickest lap, actually, when he said the car was pretty much undrivable. But it didn't look undrivable. That's the thing. I guess that's what I'm trying to get around to say. They always say, oh, Barcelona, very technical track. I never really understand what they mean by that. But I think what they possibly mean is there's nothing you can do because the corner just defines where you're going to place the car. The only place is that section from 2 to 3 where it's change of direction. And how you do that change of direction is absolutely critical because as you come out of 2, what you do out of 2 into 3 affects everything you do right up into turn 4. And that's a long bit of road there. Very, very fast bit of road. So yeah, it was a bit frustrating watching all that, but there was one glimpse of Max, of what he was doing there. Absolutely beautiful. Didn't see Charles Leclerc there close up enough to make a comment, but I suspect he's pretty good through there, and he's pretty much like Max, pretty linear as distinct from curvaceous. But yeah, when you're following cars side on, it's very, very difficult to see it. So it's kind of a shame, I think, that on a circuit where there is that great bit of road, they never show it really. You've really got to be looking maybe from the drone shot above. We did see a little bit of Lando versus Oscar, which is how I described them there. Speed on the straight, pretty much affected by toes. I mean, at one point, Max's fastest through the speed trap was 3.27 compared with Fernando Alonso 3.34 in the Aston Martin. Fernando complaining in FP1 about how slow the car was in a straight line. The McLaren's 3.31, and that you can imagine that's about right. Oscar 3.31, Lando 3.28, probably there or thereabouts. Maybe a toe involved. But then Max, having done 3.27, got a toe from Charles Leclerc on the long runs and did 3.36. So he's quick as the speed trap. There's definitely a toe. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but nonetheless, that was what happened. Anyway, going back to the long runs, wow. Lando Norris with 10-lap-old mediums, 18.7, right at the end of the run, just as they were all coming into the pits to put on soft tyres or whatever to do the standing start. Lando goes 18.5, 18.9, 18.7, 18.8. At the same time, Max is out there doing a 19.9 on softs with the same number of laps on them. So I don't know. What can I say? You know, I'm sure a lot of people are hoping that Red Bull are sandbagging, or Mercedes have got a lot more pace, and Ferrari are going to get it together. But for every bit of improvement that those three teams make, McLaren can still improve as well, of course. And right now they have a really significant advantage, particularly on race fuel, I would say. I mean, that 18.7 of Lando is just unbelievably quick. Well, destroyingly quick, really. So that was it in a nutshell. Pierre Gasly quick in the Alpine. I thought it was quite amusing at one point when they were following Franco Colapinto, who appears to be struggling in the other Alpine, and with obviously an error. But at one point, a picture of Jack Doohan came up with the graphic Jack Doohan, and we saw Colapinto running over a curb and running wide. And I imagine Jack saying, "Well, I wouldn't have done that, mate. Yeah, no way." Early days, I suppose. He's still got another couple of races to go. But at the moment, missing Jack Doohan on the grid, a lot of cars bunched together as they would. This being a technical circuit, the two racing bulls very close to one another, Isaac Hadjar and Liam Lawson. Liam absolutely totally different to Isaac when you watch them on the track. We did see a bit of them. Isaac much shorter corners and more linear than Liam, but neither Williams massively quick today. Very close together, but not quick. Surprising, really. I suppose they'll say, "Oh well, yeah, you know, Monaco's more our sort of circuit." What does that mean? They've got much better traction than most, and traction's not that important around Barcelona, I guess. But it is a high downforce circuit here, so you'd imagine they'd still be reasonably quick here. We'll see what happens tomorrow with them as well. And Kimi Antonelli, a little bit out of it in FP1, did a very good job in FP2. So Oscar Piastri, at the moment, quickest on soft tyres. George Russell, very good in the Mercedes. P2, Max Verstappen, P3. Got to say, didn't get a perfect lap, but not far away. Lando Norris, P4. Same could be said for him. Charles Leclerc on the absolute ragged edge of the Ferrari, as ever. Disappointing for them, really. 13.2, half a second slower than a McLaren, actually, with Charles on a good lap. And Lewis Hamilton down in 11th place, 13.5. Before we go, quick shout out to the supporters of this channel, to Track Ninja, to OEM Exclusive, to Jetcraft, and to REC Watches. Don't forget that you can order your REC watch with a 10% discount by mentioning the word Peter. Details in the description below, and you can choose from a number of genre. As we've been talking over the last couple of weeks, you can choose the Ayrton Senna Lotus 98 watch. You can go for one of the 3 Ford GT40 watches in the colours of Essex Wire, Shelby or Sid Taylor Racing, or you could perhaps have a look at the muscle cars as well from the 60s, the Mercury Cougars and the Ford Mustangs and the Chevrolet Camaros, wonderful, the Pontiac Firebirds. Anyway, all of it there in the recwatches.com website. Big thanks to them again. Big thanks to you for watching. Let's see what happens over the weekend. Will this orange McLaren steamroller, and they've still got the roundels on the car, will it continue? We'll see you over the weekend.